Hello, Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop role-playing games, and today we are going to be asking the question, what the fuck is this, and how did it happen? And we have Anthony here today, who is actually the player of whatever the fuck this is, and we're going to talk a little bit about him and his character and how that came to be, and all that fun stuff. So, how you doing, Anthony?
Pretty good. Just excited to dive into whatever nonsense this character is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we should probably start with
at the beginning because he used to be, and I'll put some pictures up.
I'm not sure the history that everybody has on this, but we originally started a pirate campaign that I swear I thought was going to be a one-shot, so I just created the silliest character that I could in the moment, and now we've been playing for over a year, and you saw the result, so...
So at first you just turned into a snake, like a big snake, so we called you Jimmy the Snake.
Right. So playing a shifter, Pathfinder, he had his first aspect that he chose was that of a snake. So it sounded like a silly name for a guy who didn't have very high charisma. He's not terribly socially capable. So yeah, the guy who turns into a snake, he's the snake, Jimmy the Snake.
It's a good name. It tells you everything you need to know about him.
It really does until it doesn't.
A little outdated now.
That's true.
Yeah, so now I kind of refer to him as Jimmy the Snake. A question mark at the end there because he kind of stopped just being a snake a while ago. We're not really sure, or I'm not really sure what exactly you would call him, but Wyatt, my DM, has grand designs, apparently.
I think we'd call him Thrush Rokan now.
That's true, but that doesn't necessarily describe exactly what he is.
So you had some hesitation when you started kind of working with this whole concept, and now you're like an addict who can't get enough mods to...
Yeah, so I've played plenty of games before. Past DMs that I've had are pretty by the book, so there wasn't a ton of homebrew that was introduced into the campaign. It was pretty much, here's the outline for your class, here's what abilities it gets at what level, the end, and you sometimes get to make a couple of selections here or there. I played a paladin previously. At 5th level, you choose a divine bond, but it's literally A or B. And so when it came time to, at level 5 for the shifter, pick a second aspect, Wyatt approached me with his crazy idea, and it kind of just took off from there. So I'll let Wyatt explain his thinking on that.
So of course your second aspect, you would have chosen a different weird animal to turn into. And you had expressed concerns because that meant that you were no longer going to be Jimmy the Snake. You were going to be Jimmy the Snake / owl, or whatever. Which I'm sure you could, well, yeah, we kind of got there anyway. But it would have kind of, and to be fair, it was a character, like you said, kind of started out as just I'll never have an excuse to play something this silly again. It's just a one shot.
Right.
But you liked the guy, and you were having a good time with him, and we could have killed him off, and you could have picked something else, but you wanted to keep kind of seeing where that went, and so it really came down to do I make you go with the book and advance your character in a way that doesn't really appeal to either you or the even the original concept, or do we get a little bit outside the box? And I knew about, I had a player play a summoner once before, and they had, of course, their Eidolon, who is just a creature that starts out pretty cool, and then as you level, you get points to spend to make them even stranger. And the fact that you were already playing a shifter, which is functionally just a full base attack bonus druid that can't cast spells, I kind of felt like, well, he's already... let's just take the spellcaster part all the way away from the summoner and just let you use the points. And I ran it by you, and you were pretty receptive. And that's really where it all started, I think.
I will say initially, I don't know that I was very receptive, at least not in the very, very first introduction of the concept, because I hadn't really had a ton of experience with homebrew before. I just wasn't really sure. I didn't want to imbalance things, right? You know, I'm very into making sure that everybody feels like they're equal contributors. Nobody's really outshining anybody else. And now, you know, I look at the characters in our game, and that's probably the furthest worry that I have from my mind, because everybody's kind of ridiculous. But initially, I kind of debated back and forth, and I said, you know what? I started looking at the options that were available from evolution points, and I went, yeah, you know, actually, I could do some really weird stuff with this, and I think it would make for a really fun character concept. And it has exploded into just the strangest creature from my mind that I could imagine.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you know, I mean, if we had, you know, you talked about a little bit about. I guess we haven't really talked about it yet, but we'll get into it. The Thrush Rokan aspect and all the weird things that you're finding out about the characters we're playing. And I mean, I got to tell you, had you stayed just a guy who turned into a snake and sometimes an owl and then maybe later a bear or whatever, we definitely wouldn't have had the trip to Malwar. We definitely wouldn't have had the.
Oh, that's sad.
Well, you know, I mean, it's.
yeah.
Once
I mean, he would have just been a much less interesting character. There would have been a much easier way to explain away his abilities. And now that he turns into a weird flying snake monster with arms and a unicorn horn, you know, that requires some explanation.
Yeah, I think it really. I mean, you had really, you know, said you didn't really have a lot of ideas about the character. Because he was created for one, and most everybody I don't think really had any hard backstory stuff ready to go, even past once we realized it wasn't going to be a one shot anymore. I think it really took people a while to start thinking about their backstories and actually fleshing out their characters fully.
We're still doing that.
Oh, for
I was
sure.
going to say, truth be told, it was what, a week or two ago that Sarah and I were sitting there hashing out like some extra little minutia details of the backstory that I feel like greatly expand on the relationship that they had before, and just all kinds of crazy stuff that, you know, you think about it, like your average D&D character is somewhere in the realm of like 20 to 30 years old, unless you're intentionally playing an older character. That's not a life to live. So if you didn't do anything interesting, then, I mean, that's no fun. You got to have a lot of crazy stuff in the background.
Well, and you also have to consider, you know, how did this person go from, you know, probably a normal life to, even in your case where you're just pirates as opposed to being like hardcore dungeon delving adventurers. I mean, it's not easy to just go from a quiet life in a village to putting your life at risk on a daily basis for coin, you know?
Right.
So you have to kind of, that's why you get so many tragic backstories and things like that, because you have to have a good reason to.
Yeah, we got a whole party of tragic backstories going for us. So
but yeah, so then this was your first iteration here,
which we had to go find a file for, and then so just to hop off to the minis for a second, we had to sculpt arms onto it.
And we probably could have gotten just a regular Coatl mini, because that's pretty much what you were really. Yeah, we could have gone with a pre-purchased Coatl, but a lot of those are
They're just not right.
Yeah, they just weren't quite right. And we found this file, and it worked pretty well.
It wasn't perfect.
I mean, I was really impressed, even with the initial kind of weird transformation model. You know, you say the guy who turns into a snake suddenly sprouted wings and grew arms in his snake form, and everybody kind of goes, what?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and that was that was really fun. It was that was really, I think, where the concept of where Jimmy came from and Malwar really all started there was once you decided, because when I first offered it to you, I was really expecting you to just, go with some of the more boring options, maybe add a stinger or something like that, and then just sort of like up.
I did just add a stinger. What are you doing to me, man?
I mean, only that, like I really, when I first offered it to you, I'd been expecting you to stay pretty much a snake and just beef it up here and there and find ways to and find ways to just be more snaky, and then you came at me and you said, okay, well, I'm gonna have some arms and and it's as soon as you did that, as soon as we were getting really off the map like that, and I could tell we were really creating something that was ridiculous. That's really when it
I choose the word awesome.
But that's really when I kind of made the realization that we were going to have to probably get some sort of an explanation for what that was and how that worked and why you were you.
I do want to talk about that. So you were this many for a while, and then you had a really cool moment where you kind of evolved, and it was like this very somatic, awesome upgrade that you got to do, and a very important moment. So now he's got like this mantle, and he's got all sorts of shit going on.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that's outside the actual, even the scope of the class as we designed it. A lot of that ties back to story elements, and I mean, some of it is, I picked a feat that made it so that I can adopt a celestial form, for example, when I transform, and just taking the extra mile and translating it into something that just made him look that much more majestic and cool was really a rewarding experience for me as a player, because there's this visual feedback of like, hey, you look really cool. I don't know if anybody noticed or not, but that's a really crazy character concept that I've certainly never played anything even
I don't think anybody has ever played anything remotely similar to this.
I'd say it's got to be a pretty small number.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about sort of how your little upgrades go? How you like some of the options you had to pick from, and
yeah. So anybody who's familiar with the summoner class knows what my options essentially are. I'm pulling directly from the evolution abilities of the Eidolon. Some of the stuff that I've spent points on really is kind of boring when you think about it in seclusion. I grew arms, and on those arms I have claws, and I, increased the damage of my bite attack or things like that. But then you get to kind of fill in the shading on what it is that you've selected. So, all this color and stuff like that that's just flavor decision. And I think that I was really inspired by the kinds of things that I was able to do to create sort of this rainbow monstrosity that we've got going now. So
it's got glitter coming soon. I told you.
Sorry?
I owe you some glitter.
Yes, yeah, some additional glitter, and I think at one point we talked about, like a lightning mesh around the character.
Yeah,
I think we're going to take care of that. I think we're going to take care of that with special effects on the YouTube video instead, because it's a lot less
did
work.
In the last game by accident.
Yeah, so that's where Jimmy's been. That's
We should mention the unicorn horn,
Oh,
because
yes.
I'm sure people are like, why?
Well, so that actually is a result of a feat. Again, mutated shape lets you add in an extra appendage if necessary and an additional attack so that it works. And gore is you grow a series of horns, whatever, and blah blah blah. But as I was sitting talking about the concept with Sarah, I was like, I could just get like a big horn right in the middle of his head. Like that'd be kind of interesting, right? And she immediately jumped on it as, dude, it's a unicorn horn, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's ridiculous. I like that.
Yeah, it was kind of a silly idea, and and I was just like, you should ask why, because I guarantee you will say yes. No hesitation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, because of the last story arc that we've been going through has been, heavily focused on my character. There have been some story reward abilities that have kind of tied into it that are outside the scope of the class. And again, that comes back to just being willing to homebrew in cool things for your characters. And I imagine that as we go forward, I mean, I've already seen other characters getting cool abilities and upgrades to either their equipment or otherwise related to story beats. And I expect that we'll see even more of that as we get into other people's stories and just dive into the absurdity that's behind all of these characters, really.
Yeah, I think especially just where I mean, my background as a DM has always been about homebrew, and it's about letting players create characters that are really specific to them and their story and what they want to do with the character. And I don't ever want anyone to be sitting there thinking, oh man, I wish my character was more like this, or I wish I could do that. The reality is that if you're just willing to, just get your hands a little bit dirty, you can really accomplish a lot. I mean, now you've gone from being a shifter to functionally being an eidolon to, and now because of that celestial template, you're now a little bit of a paladin too.
A little bit, just a little bit.
It's like this ridiculous character, but then we dove into this really rich story and met his mom and his dad and learned all about where he comes. Well, learned some stuff about this. It got all serious with this guy with the unicorn horn. So it's like
the guy who usually was sitting in the background who he kind of talks like this, and he doesn't really get along terribly well with people, and he doesn't really like them or want to be around them, is suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Yeah, he's suddenly forced to be the hero of his own story, and it's interesting how that can change a character's perspective. And it was really interesting to be in his head, trying to figure out, okay, he's learning these things about his character. What does that mean for how he goes forward? And I think we're still figuring that out, but I'm pretty excited by it. And all of that comes back to, I got to make this really weird character that in turn had to have a good story to explain how that was possible. And now we're just so far off in the deep end, but it's amazing.
Yeah. We just left the island, or we're leaving the island, and this introverted weirdo has people just throwing parties for him because he just saved everybody. So it's been really interesting. I don't think you expected the story to go quite this way with him, but
no. This is I could not have imagined this when we first started playing in our little one shot. With this character especially, I could not have ever imagined this is where we'd be at this point.
Oh, we should mention that his arc was where the hunter came in. So we just did a video on this, and we'll put a link up. But
that reveal was a little traumatic. We all had sort of that moment of, what the fuck is that? Because what is that? And yeah, it made for a really cool encounter. It made for a really cool kind of cap to the story arc and the dungeon that we had kind of been traversing. And it's really just sort of one of the first steps. I mean, this is probably the first major sort of world relevant story arc that we've gone through with all these characters, and it has set the stage for all of these crazy further threads that now we get to figure out how, why, if we follow. But I have a feeling that it's really only a matter of time before we get sucked into things much larger than us. So
well, I mean, we talked about you leaving the island, and I know that outside of the game, in a lot of the conversations, you weren't sure that was going to happen. I mean, Jimmy had found everything that he thought he would never find, and it was something that you'd asked me. You said, how are we gonna get him off this island? Because
convince him,
because
he's found his family.
Yeah,
and they needed help.
Yeah, but it's I would never put you in that situation without having a a reason for you to leave it. And I think that, when your mother, when she told you that, that you were needed more elsewhere, I think that that's enough to, it was enough to get you off the island. And I'm hoping it's enough to get everybody to realize that some of these story threads you guys have been leaving dangling aren't really going away just because you're not looking at them. But
What are those guys? All the memes, all the D&D memes that DMs share about how their players ignore.
I mean, there was 1 or 2 shards before. Who knows how many there are now?
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things too. One of the things that we've been talking about is how you're letting the players do all of these crazy things, and I think the fear a lot of times is that you're going to make your players too powerful, or that one player is going to end up too powerful, whatever it is. But really, that just, as far as I'm concerned, that makes it more fun for you, Wyatt, because when your players are pretty strong, that means you get to do crazy stuff and pull monsters that you may not otherwise be able to. Case in point with the hunter, and just really go off the rails and challenge them and just do really interesting, intricate encounters. And I think there's something to be said for upping the homebrew on both sides. If you're going to make your players really crazy and powerful and interesting, it's sort of on you to do the same thing with your monsters. If you're throwing kobolds at your flying snake monster thing, then you're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, I've always been of the mindset that and this is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I feel like as the dungeon master, I am empowered. If I ever need to hurt you, I can. There's a million ways to do it. So I don't mind if my players get strong. I mean, I was munchkin myself, I was a min-maxer. It's just a big part of the game that I love is having a character that's actually good at what they're supposed to be good at. And I don't like to fail at what I'm supposed to be good at. And so I want my players to be able to do that. I want my players to be, especially now that we're at level 9. Level 10. Now that you guys are level 10, I mean, realistically in the world, the number of things that are technically on par with you is dwindling.
Right.
You shouldn't ever run the risk of running into a group of brigands that can out-sword play the captain, for example. That doesn't mean that he can't get a challenging sword fight, which we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, you put him up against 50 brigands by himself, and he's going to have a little bit different a time with that. But
or against the fencer that you guys found down here on the island. I mean, there's a million fun ways that you can come at your players, even if they're a little on the strong side. And it really just frees me up, like you said, as the DM to throw tougher things at you, to throw things at you that I would never throw at, a more by the book level 9 party. I mean, I think I can safely say that there's nobody in the party that is functioning quite at the level that you would expect them to be at this level, even with a game that can get a little bloated like Pathfinder. I mean, I try to control certain numbers. Your guys' AC has been a little on the low side for the most part. I think we're finally ready to let that correct itself. But other than that, I really haven't restricted you much. And the goal for that is that you can't be broken if you can be killed with HP damage. And that's the reality, especially in a game like Pathfinder where numbers can get so explosive so easily. You can just, you can be dealing 20 damage one round and then the next everything goes exactly right. You're dealing 60 damage, 70 damage. I think for you right now, if everything goes off, you're dealing about 120, something like that.
Yeah, it's in that neighborhood. Yeah. But, that requires that I get up to something and it lets me unload on it without trying to move away or control me or contain me in some way, which, I still playing a shifter mechanically, like still got crappy will saves, and I'm not, a fear or something like that would still pretty much incapacitate me. So.
Yeah, remember that time you laid a boat?
I do, in fact, remember that time I ate a boat, and it was a pretty cool moment in my character's life.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun combat encounter. We had the ship-to-ship combat going, and we also had combat happening on the deck of the Blue Suede, which is the name of your ship. That was a really fun one. And would that have been possible if you were Jimmy the Snake or Jimmy the Hawk? No.
I would have been able to swim around in the water, and I would maybe bite at a ship with, just like regular teeth. And that probably would have been pretty ineffective. So, no, it would not have.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about how we got here. And I know that you're not privy to all the things that I am privy to, but where do you see Jimmy in 5 levels?
No
in
pressure.
5 levels,
It'll probably happen whatever you say.
Well, I don't want to reveal too much of what I've shared with you because I know that our players will be able to see this, and I'd like to keep some mystery about where the character's going. But I will just say that he's got big plans that are starting to formulate in his little snaky brain, and this experience on the island has really opened his eyes to a realm of possibility for himself that he didn't otherwise even imagine was possible. He's had a lot of people put a lot of really big ideas into his head, and basically everything they've said that he was capable of doing, he's done. So 5 levels from now, aside from some more weird mutation stuff that's probably going to happen because that's how often that happens, I think he might be well on his way to a much larger role in the world.
Yeah.
I think we should come back to after the whole game ends and check back and see where is he.
If things pan out the way that I would like them to, we will have a really interesting story to tell about where he ended up. So
I don't want to. It all is going to come down to choices and dice rolls and things. So I don't want to say for sure, but I think just based on what we talked about, I think that there's. I definitely think there is room for the narrative that you're working on right now, and I know that. I know that we're a long way away from campaign 2, but like I said, it's most likely going to be in the same world, and we'll see what kind of ramifications the actions of the party and Jimmy himself in particular might have on the world once we get there. But I'm pretty excited to see where Jimmy and the rest of the party go, and I'm very like I said, I realized that the homebrewing was my idea. I realized that, so much of it was you taking a chance on my idea, but really, Jimmy would not be where he is today just based on my input. I would never have, I thought we were going to make a crazier version of this. And that's not where we ended up. And I think that's just a testament to.
I think we used this menu like one time.
Maybe twice.
Yeah.
But I think it's a testament to, why tabletop role-playing games will always be superior to a video game. Just the way that you can just do what you want with it and really just dismantle something and build it back totally different. And I think on the whole, aside from a couple of like this shiny gold item, aside from a couple of things like that, I would argue that you are not particularly busted at all, really. I think that you're definitely strong, but you're a smart player and you know how to invest your points to do what you want to do. You're an experienced, very capable player. So I think that you're not any stronger than you would have been if we were playing something out of the box, but you're definitely more interesting and more specialized to exactly the bizarro vision that you had in your head.
He's definitely the most custom character, but it never feels like he's got special treatment or like more he's right balanced with everybody.
Yeah.
Well, even in the midst of his story, there's all kinds of other story beats that are taking place. You'll get into, I'm sure, some of the other characters, but they've all got stuff going on, either behind the scenes or front and center. pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited to dive into aspects of their stories too. So
Yeah.
also a little terrified in certain individuals' case, but you know,
Oh yeah, Bologna is a
Yeah.
scary one, right?
we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I am looking forward to Bologna's for sure.
I'm not. I'm terrified she's gonna kill us all.
Yeah,
I like her word where
it's
she's
a
at.
little scary.
Yeah.
It's a little scary
She's on a
that.
fine line.
I'm going to tell you
She's
my
got-
favorite. I'm going to tell you my favorite part is that with Jimmy and Chimera, I've got a pretty good idea, and you guys have a pretty good idea, I think, especially you, Anthony, of what is. I think I might just mess with my mic, but you guys have a pretty good idea of what your characters are looking like going forward, and an idea of what your role is in the story. And I know that. Especially in the case of Valonia, Amanda has just been not to get too on to somebody else on your video, but Amanda has just been a very yes and type of person here for some of the things. I definitely don't think that you guys are quite aware of how often I do little chats just to her.
Oh, good. That makes me feel miles better. Thank you.
You know, and she's been just tremendous. So I am very excited to have her around, and I love hearing your guys' theories on where that's going.
We're all going to die.
I mean, that's generally just what I assume every game always. It could be a shopping episode, and we're probably all going to die. So.
She's for this is the day where she kills us in our sleep because she hates
Yep.
shopping.
Yep.
Well, I think that's
Yeah, I think
that
that's,
wraps up Jimmy the Snake.
yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah, I was gonna say I really do like the idea of maybe post campaign having another one of these where we talk about it.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think just from what I've seen from, I think we started level 4 to level 10 and how different that got. I'm guessing we're gonna have a pretty different Jimmy sitting here in front of us when level 20 comes around.
No promises.
the minis.
I mean, I'm just saying there was a version of him that had like 3 heads and 4 legs and was flying around like a crazy, weird Hydra dragon monster. But that has not, at least yet, come to
At least
fruition.
yet. Will they all have unicorn horns?
That costs a lot of points. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks a lot, Anthony, for taking the time and talking
for
about
having me.
this. And I know that we had a lot of questions on some of the
People want
forums
to
and
know
things.
what the fuck this is.
Well, now,
Dragon.
I hope we have answered that to some degree of satisfaction.
right. I mean, there's things we can't get into, but really, I think for Jimmy, even for the players, for the most part, up to now, he's a pretty open book. So certainly, there's elements that you, Anthony, don't know yet, and certainly there's elements that the rest of the party, we'll just have to see. But yeah, I think we're able to answer quite a bit of it. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying Jimmy.
Oh,
Fresh rope
it's
pass.
my favorite character that I've ever played.
Oh, that's what every DM wants to hear.
That's what he's fishing for.
That's great.
All right. Well, hope you guys like this video, and we will have some more weird creations coming up on our playlist. So just stay tuned to that. Hit the subscribe so you can see when those come out. And we'll see you next time. Welcome to the collection.
Bye, everybody.